I wanted to pick up in November the 6th, 1922. We've already done the first big paragraph, but just to give it, I'm doing this for the sake of the recording. Just to give it context, I just want to read that paragraph again. So Luisa said, as I was in my usual state, my beloved Jesus made himself seen holding many little lambs in his arms. Some were leaning on his breast, some on his shoulders, some were clinging to his neck, some on the right, some on the left of his arms, and some peeking out with their little heads from his heart. However, the feet of all these little lambs were all in the heart of the Lord, and his breath, which of course is the Holy Spirit, was the nourishment that he gave them. They were all turned with their mouths towards the mouth of my sweet Jesus to receive the nourishment of his breath. It was really beautiful to see how Jesus took highest delight, all intent on nourishing them and delighting with them. They really seemed as many births delivered from his most holy heart. Then turning to me, he said, my daughter, these little lambs that you see in my arms are the children of my will, legitimate births from my supreme volition. Legitimate there is that baptism makes us the adoptive children of God, and the divine will makes us the actual children of God. They will come out from my heart, but will keep their feet in the centre of my heart. That's where you're grounded, so that they may take nothing from the earth. In other words, you're living the highest level of spirituality possible. So you're not taking anything from earth, you're taking it all from heaven. And they may be concerned with nothing but me alone. Look at them, how beautiful they are, how clean and nourished they grow, fed by my breath alone. They will be the glory and the crown of my creation. And then he added, my will crystallizes the soul, makes us like glass, able to let the light of God through with no difficulty. And just as when any object is placed close to a crystal, another object is formed within it fully similar to the one which has been placed in front of it. In the same way, my will reflects all that it does in these souls, crystallized by my power. And they repeat and they do all that my supreme will does. And since my will is everywhere, in heaven, on earth, and in every place, by containing my will within them as life, wherever my will acts, these souls absorb it like crystal within them, and they repeat my act. So, as I act, I take great delight in placing myself in front of them to see my own action being repeated in them. They are my mirrors, and my will multiplies them everywhere for every act that it does. Therefore, there's not one created thing in which they are not present. Fantastic, isn't it? They are present in creatures, that is in human beings, in the sea, in the sun, in the stars, even in heaven. And my will receives the requital for my act from the soul in a divine manner. Okay, so now I want to pick up at the second paragraph. He wants his divine will known.
Can we add to that list by putting in time?
So the next paragraph is about making the divine will known. Okay. This is also the reason why I love so much that living in my will be known. Why? Because he wants more legitimate children of the divine will. He wants more and more. He wants to fill his house. To multiply more of these mirrors, rendered as crystals by my will, to have my works repeated in them. Then I will not be alone anymore, and I will have human beings. The creature is always human beings in my company. That is Proverbs 8:31. The Lord delights to be with the children of men. You also have Genesis 3:8, where God walked with Adam in the cool of the day, and that's a sign of his very intimate relationship with him. I will have her with me. That with me is in union, not just physically with. Intimately with me, again, is emphasizing the union. In the depth of my will. Now notice in the depth, not in the periphery. Almost inseparable from me. Now, almost, I think, is a very interesting word, and I've underlined it, because he describes Blessed Mother as inseparable to him, because she had the divine will from conception to her passing. Eventually, he said that Luisa was inseparable from him once you get up into the 20s volumes. And that's because she had reached the point of this being in the divine will with no return. He says almost for the rest of us because there's no guarantee we'll go the whole way. Is that okay? I just want to notice the almost there. So, almost inseparable from me, as if she had come out of my womb when I created her. As if she had just, come out of my womb, having followed no other ways contrary to my will. You see, it's the having followed no other ways. See, that's when you would be inseparable. See, that's the position of Blessed Mother. It was the position of Adam before the fall. It was the position of Luisa in her later life. Okay, I say later. I'm not putting a date on that. Okay. And he said that he wants us there, so how happy he would be. And then in the next paragraph he says, and you begin to understand why he says almost, you can only take from the divine will what you know is there. You can't take from your cupboard what you don't know is there. Isn't that right? So you've got to actually know the divine will. So the emphasis here is on knowledge, which is terribly important. On hearing this, Luisa said to him, "My love and my life, I still cannot convince myself. How is it possible that no saint has done your will always?" Now, you see that she's misinterpreting? Done your will, to do the will of God. All good Christians try to do the will of God. And all other people, insofar as they understand what they're talking about, if they're good people, try to do the will of God. That's not what he's talking about. He's living inside in the depths of the will. Now, he lets her make these so-called mistakes because these are our questions to give us the answer. So, how is it possible that no saint has done your most holy will always? Now, it's the always is the problem. She knew that the saints did the will and has lived in the way that you are saying in your will. And Jesus said, my daughter, you still don't want to convince yourself that one can take as much light, grace, variety and value for as much as one knows. All the saints before Luisa did not know you could live in the divine will at a divine level. So how could they reach out for it? Surely there have been saints who have always done my will, but they took of my will as much as they knew. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. They knew that doing my will was the greatest act, that which honoured me the most and which brought sanctification. And with this intention, they did it. Okay. This is what they took, because there is no sanctity without my will. That bit needs to be underlined, because if you're teaching others, it needs to be really, really underlined. Because there is a theoretical possibility that someone could just read all this material and enjoy it and not do the will of God. And if they don't do the will of God, it's a total waste of time. Okay. So there's no sanctity outside of the divine will. And there is no good, no sanctity, big or small, will come without it. So I want to give you Micah 6:8, which is the Old Testament way of saying it. This is what the Lord asks of you, only this, that you would act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with your God. I want to give you John 14:15 and 23. John 14, verses 15 and 23. John 14, 15 and 23. So next paragraph again is you must know the divine will. You must know it. You must know what my will was, what it is, and what it will be. Therefore, can't you see the emphasis on study here? That's the battle I have fought in divine will circles. We must study. You must know what my divine will was, how it has acted throughout history, what it is, and what it will be. It has changed in nothing. But as it manifests itself, it makes known the variety of colours, effects, and values that it contains. Now, the colours, effects, and values are all the attributes of God that are manifested in a person who goes deeper and deeper into the divine will. So, if you are claiming to be living in the divine will and there is no manifestation of divine wisdom inside of you, forget about it. Your claim is false. Because wisdom is the first stroke of the brush. Wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, and the fear of the Lord. Okay, it's the first stroke of the brush. And if there is no love in the actions of the person who claims to be living the divine will, they're not in the divine will, because God is love. And the two subjects that summarize the 36 volumes are divine will and love. Okay, that's it, because it's the same person. So if these two attributes of wisdom and love are not manifesting more and more in us, then we do not have the proof that we're actually in the divine will. We can claim it. Just as I could claim to be a pilot, but how could I prove it? I couldn't. But as the divine will manifests itself, it makes known the variety of colours, effects. In other words, you begin to see a transformation in people. And it does not just make itself known, but it gives to the soul the variety of colours, effects, and values. That's like saying we become gradually transfigured as Jesus was transfigured in an instant. Okay, the transfiguration of Jesus was one of the reasons was to show us what God wants to do in us, and with us it has to happen slowly. He said, and if this wasn't so, why would you make them known? In other words, he's not just titivating our mind with ideas. He's giving something to us to change us completely. My will acted like a great lord who showed his most extensive and sumptuous palace. Now watch this, number one. To the first one, he's answering her question about throughout history were there not people who did your will. Okay, so he's answering that. So to the first ones, so you go back in time to deal with the first saints, okay. He pointed out the way to reach the palace. Okay. To the second lot, so we've now moved on in history, he showed the door. To the third group, he showed the stairs. To the fourth group, he showed the first rooms. And to the last ones, we're the people in the parable of the 11th hour. Okay. He opened all the doors. And you know the people at the 11th hour were paid first. And they were paid exactly as anybody else. So making the last ones the owners and making and giving them all the goods that are in the whole thing. Okay. Now, the first ones have taken the goods which are on the way. The second ones have taken the goods that were at the door, superior to those on the way. The third one, those of the stairs, more superior than the people at the door. The fourth one, the first rooms, and so on. And the last one, the goods of the whole palace. In other words, he gives us everything he has. I want to give you Matthew 19:50. I also want to remind you of the mansions of St. Teresa of Avila. She says there are 6 mansions. You go deeper and deeper and deeper into the mansions. Okay. But here you're seeing not just an individual going deeper and deeper into the mansions, but you're seeing the church over a period of 2,000 years going deeper and deeper in understanding. The interesting thing is that if you've done enough study of the divine will and go back and read Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, you'll realise how limited they were. And yet they were the greats of the 16th century. They were the stars of the 16th century. But if they were only in the first rooms or on the stairs, that's all that was available to them. For example, John of the Cross wrote eloquently about divine union. And that divine union was it. But Luisa was a teenager when she totally surpassed him, and she had 3 divine unions that John of the Cross would never, ever have been able to conceive. Do you see what I mean by the church has moved on, and the church has actually moved deeper? So, the next paragraph then, Jesus said, that is what my will has done. My book says so. That is what my will has done. It had to make known the way, the door, the stairs, the first rooms, to be able to move on into the whole immensity of my will. Now, that's what he's talking to Luisa about. And that's what he's making available to our generation, the whole immensity of his will. And to show them the great goods that are in it, and how the soul operating in these goods contained in my will acquires the variety of its colours, of its immensity, sanctity and power. Now watch this. You'd never have associated the words immensity, you would with sanctity, and definitely not with power, with the saints of the past. Okay? So it's a completely different stage altogether. In making something known, Jesus said, I give and I impress within the soul that divine quality which I make known. And one of the reasons why we have to read this stuff very, very slowly for ourselves is to allow the thing to happen as you're reading it. Because to me, that's what I understand about imbibing this stuff. Not that I can explain it intellectually to you, but that when I'm reading it and he says, I give and impress within the soul that divine quality, and I've just read what he has wanted to give, I say, Lord, I'm open right now. And that's exactly what he wants. That if you're open right now to receive it, you don't have to wait another second. And even though you don't understand fully what he's saying, that doesn't matter, he'll still give it to you. I mean, an infant knows nothing about nutrition, and yet they feed very well, don't they? It's because the mother knows about the nutrition, and that's okay. And so in that relationship, the child gets everything. So the Lord knows everything. He's trying to feed us. All we do is what the infant does, is open the mouth and receive the food. But I may not have said to you before that you need to just stop at that moment and say, Lord, this is the moment for me. This is what I want. He said, if you knew under what mighty waves of grace you are, when I move on to make known other effects of my will, and how as a skillful painter I paint in your soul, that's Ephesians 2:10, or God's work of art, Ephesians 2:10. I paint in your soul with the most vivid colours the different effects and values that I make known to you. You would remain crushed under my waves. You just wouldn't be able to take it. But having compassion for your weakness, I sustain you. And while sustaining you, I impress more within you what I tell you, because if I speak, I act. Now that really needs to be coloured. If I speak, I act. And therefore, the only response I can give to this is that as I read, I open up. It's the same with the Word of God. Okay. So he has now been explaining that to us right now, and if we're open, it happens. He just gives it to you, regardless of whether you understand it or not. It bypasses the intellect and goes straight into the soul. So November the 8th, 1922 is about peace. Now, I should have alerted you to this a couple of years ago, but love, joy, peace are right all over the stuff. So I now just put a big sign that I have my love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. It's all over this stuff. They're the fruits of the Spirit. So Jesus says that peace without God is impossible. It's terribly important. Imagine trying to put peace inside the British Parliament. Luisa said, I'm going through most bitter days because of the privations of my sweet Jesus. And if he makes himself seen, he's so afflicted and taciturn, that means he's chastising, that as much as I may say, I cannot manage to console him, and I remain more embittered than before. Then this morning on coming, he said to me, my daughter, the pains, the offences that people give me are so many that I cannot take any more. Now, what's he talking about? The nations are banding together to enter the field of new wars. In other words, 1922, they're already planning World War III. And they've been planning World War II. They've been already planning World War III for the last 20 years. If you don't believe me, go on the internet. And I've seen the whole theatre of World War III all planned out. And exactly what they want to do and what countries they want to conquer and how they want to shift things around. It's all planned. Got it on the internet about 10 years ago. So that's what he's saying to Luisa, that he's letting her know what's already being planned quietly behind closed doors among the people who have power. Wait till you hear what he thinks of them. Did I not tell you that the wars have not ended and that the peace that is after World War I was a false and apparent peace? Because peace without God is impossible, because God is peace. And the only time we can have peace means at one with God, at one with myself, and at one with my neighbour. That's actually what peace is. At oneness. Okay. And without that at oneness, whatever arrangement they make is only temporary. So, it was a peace, that's the First World War, it was a peace that did not come from justice. You see, because there's people doing land grabbing and all kinds of stuff. Therefore, it couldn't last. The leaders of these times, 1922, are true incarnate devils. Isn't that strong language? Don't tell me they went to heaven. The leaders of these times are true incarnate devils who are banding together to do evil, to cast confusion, and to make slaughters and wars among the peoples. Now that's what heaven thinks of it. And while he was saying this, I could hear the crying of mothers, the thundering of cannons, the alarms of the cities, and I hope that Jesus will placate himself, she says. Now, she has shifted into her role of opening the kingdom of the divine will, so her role as victim soul has gone into the background, and that's why she says, I can do nothing about it. But she can actually, she doesn't admit the power of the suffering of her privations. She will admit that when she gets up into the 20s volumes, that the pain she experiences is a divine pain because it's done in the divine will. Okay, and therefore has actually got incredible power. But her own opinion of a victim soul is I must be carrying the crown of thorns, or I must be crucified, or I must be carrying the cross. That's all gone. Okay. So November the 11th, 1922. The heading I've given myself for this one is Called to Live in Divine Will. That's the heading I've given to the whole thing. So, upon coming, my beloved Jesus drew me so very close to himself within an immense light. Now, we're in volume 14. God is light. 1 John 1:5. God is light. And the immense light is also the divine will. The divine will is just, from here on in, it's called the light. And he told me, little daughter of my will, the immense light you see is my supreme will. Do you see it? Okay. And from here on in, the light will be the divine will, from which nothing escapes. How can you say nothing escapes it? Because the divine will is present in everything, animate and inanimate, and it's preserving everything in being. You must know that as I created the heavens, the sun, the stars, etc., for all, I fixed the limits, the place, and the number that they can neither increase nor decrease. Now, the astrophysicists would absolutely challenge that. They would say that the universe is expanding, it probably is, and that the number of galaxies is increasing. It's probably the number that we are becoming able to see is increasing, because we know now there's at least 100 billion galaxies. And that's only, I think, because our instruments allow us to see further and further. Okay. But I want to give you Job chapters 38 to 40 for the control that's in the fixing the limits. God said to Job, where were you when I created the morning and when I said to the sea, thus far and no further? And it's beautiful the way it's put. It's very poetic. The number of everything is Psalm 147 verse 4. The Lord has numbered everything. Okay. And any of the scientists will tell you, the physicists will tell you that everything in the universe can be converted into numbers, into mathematics, you know, and the two most extraordinary structures in the universe is a circle and a cube. They're the most perfect structures, and Jesus actually talks about them somewhere, I think it's in volume 10. So he fixed the limits, the place, the number, and they can neither increase nor decrease. I hold all things as though in the palm of my hand. That's Isaiah 49:16. The Lord holds you in the palm of his hand. Isaiah 49:16. In the same way, in creating man, at the same time, I created all the intelligences, watch this, and each thought, all words, works, steps, and all the rest of man, from the first to the last, that will exist. He created absolutely everything. So you think you can produce an original thought? Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? And all the rest, he said. And this was as though natural to me. Why? Because he's the creator. More so since I myself was to be the actor and the spectator. Actor is the source and the prime mover. Okay, that's what the scholars call him. The theologians, the prime mover. And the spectator, that he would watch us actually doing it. Of even every single thought. Now, you need to take those words off the page, write them on a sheet of paper where you can see them, and realise that he is the actor and spectator of all my thoughts. I better be careful, hadn't I? So 2 Corinthians 10:5. Paul says every thought is to be captured and given to Christ, put under his dominion. Okay. I also want to give you Psalm 139. Lord, you know my thoughts before I think them. You know my words before I say them. That's verses 1 to 5, I think. Okay. So, since man would not be able to do it without me, that's John 15:5. Without me you can do nothing. Okay. How could I not know it? And know also their number? Therefore, all the works of the creatures swim inside of my will, just as fish swim inside a vast sea. Isn't that amazing? Okay. But actually, this thing of the Lord knowing all our thoughts and all our desires and all our everything is good news if you're living a holy life. If you want to live a bad life and you want to be sort of free of God and declare yourself an atheist and everything, it feels awfully like Big Brother is watching me. And he is. He knows everything. That's why on the Day of Judgment, none of us will have a prayer. Won't have an excuse, because all the thoughts. And he says he keeps everything in his book. That's in the book of life, the Lamb's book of life. And you find that in Revelation 20 and 21, the Lamb's book of life. He says, everything is marked there. Now, for those who are living a holy life and a divine life, he says that everything you do for him will have its compensation on the other side, everything. But everything you do for the other side will have its consequences as well. Next paragraph. However, having created man not a slave but free, because it would not have been right, the word in my book says decorous, it wouldn't have been right for me, nor a work worthy to come out of my hands, had I delivered this man hampered and without freedom. Okay? In other words, God wanted to create a creature that had free will and could actually decide to have a free relationship with him. Now, in other words, he was not interested in robots. He said, nor could I have said, let us make him in our image and likeness. That's Genesis 1:27. Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:7. It is actually a quotation of Genesis 1:27. So I could not have said, let us make him in our own image and likeness. Notice our in the plural, and you have the our in the Genesis as well. Had I not made him free, in other words, we would not actually be like God if we weren't free. We actually wouldn't be like him. And we wouldn't be like God if we couldn't love. And free to love is very like God, okay? I wanted to endow him with freedom. I was free. Free he was to be also. Besides, there's nothing that tortures a person more than to give a forced love. Okay. Think of all the poor women who are forced into marriage as children, for example, which causes diffidence, suspicions, fears, and almost disgust to the one who receives it. Okay. So now he's going to talk about the origin of thought and the redoing of everything. And he's going to bring up the subject of seals. So that's a lot that's coming up now in the next sections. Do you see where the act of every person, even their thought, where do you see where it has its origin? Now, in the Bible, the word origin is given as father. Abba means my origin. Okay, where has it got its origin? And he says that every act of the creature has its origin in the sanctity of God's will. With this difference, excuse me, that if man wants, he can do that very thought and word or set it well or badly, in a holy way or wickedly. He's free, you see. And if there are not two ways, you're not free. If there's only one way from here to Cork, then you don't have the freedom to go any other way. If there's no choice, there's no freedom. So he said he can do it well or badly, in a holy way or wickedly. Now, my will grieved, that's Ephesians 4:30, the Holy Spirit grieving at our bad will. Now, my will grieved in seeing the acts of many, of which that is the will of God, the divine will, was not the actor. In which it was the actor, changed into deadly acts for me and for them. Now, any act that we do, if God doesn't concur with it, you can't do it, because he's the author and the sustainer of the universe. And what horrifies him, and if we grasp this, it'll horrify us as well, that he allows me, because I'm free, to do it well or badly, with good or bad intent, okay, with grace or with wickedness. And so it is a very personal insult to him, that something that originated in him is turned to wickedness. Now, where did that start? That started with Lucifer, didn't it? The angel of light, turning all the light that was in him into darkness, turning all the love that was in him into hatred, turning all the willingness to serve into rebellion. Okay, that's the freedom to act one way or the other. Therefore, I wanted that my will, becoming the double actor of each act, lay another divine act over all. So since the human race had fallen, and we were now turning acts that in their origin are holy, turning them into evil by our sinfulness, then the Lord comes along and he lays a divine act over that in redoing the human person, in order to enable us to be able to turn back. So he becomes the double actor then, because he's creator and he's redeemer. You might like to write down creator and redeemer. Okay, so the first action was the creation, and the second one was the redemption. So that's the double act. So a divine act is then laid over all of our acts, enabling us to turn back if we want to. And so this was to repay me with as many other divine acts according to the sanctity of my will. So I want to give you Hebrews, it's not Hebrews. Okay, I will give you Hebrews. Hebrews 10, and I think it's verses 1 to 10. And those verses, Hebrews 10, verses 1 to 10, those verses quote Psalm 40, verses 4 to 6. And the text that's being quoted is, "You have given me a body, and in this body I will come to do your will." That's the words of Christ in the incarnation. Okay. So he comes to do his will, so he's coming to lay this act of divine will over all our acts. However, someone was needed to do this, and here was my humanity. So the first person to come and lay the first seal of the divine will is Jesus. The next paragraph is going to give us the second one, which is Mary, and the third paragraph is going to give us the third seal, which is Luisa. And then we've got to come for the human race together and give the fourth seal, which is us. So here is my humanity, holy and free, which, wanting no other life than the divine will, swimming in this immense sea, went on redoubling each thought, word and work of each soul, and laid an act of the divine will over it all. That's the redoing of the human race. This satisfied and glorified the divine Father in such a way that he was able to look at man and open the doors of heaven to him in redemption. And I bound the human will more strongly, leaving it always free, not to detach from the will of the Creator, since detaching from it had made it fall into so many disasters. So here the human will is made much stronger by being connected with Christ. Everything is through him, with him, and in him. It's connected with Christ. He took everything into himself. And he did all the penance and the reparation for every thought, word, and action of ours. So now we come to the second seal, which is Blessed Mother. But I wasn't content with this, he said. You see, he was divine and human. He had to have someone that was completely human. And then when he comes to Luisa, it's not enough to have Blessed Mother because she was perfect and sinless. So then he needed someone who was born not perfect and with original sin. And so there's your seals. And then finally he has us who were not born any special way like Blessed Mother. And we were not given the extraordinary helps that Luisa was given. We're even more ordinary. And therefore you have all of these seals given to humanity to enable them to come back. We don't know how it works, but he knows, and that's the important thing. Okay, so I wanted my mother. You're having divine will acts, layer upon layer, laid down on the human race, enabling us to turn back to God. I wanted my mother holy. Now, the word holy in the Bible is kadosh, Kadosh. I wanted to give you the Hebrew word, kadosh, Kadosh. And the reason why I wanted to do that was to tell you that it means separated from evil. Very often when we use the word holy, we mean sort of X amount of sanctity. Whereas the Bible means that the person is separated from evil. So I wanted my mother holy as well to follow me in the immense sea of the supreme volition and to duplicate all human acts together with me, placing a double seal. So now you have the seal of the God-man and you have the seal of Blessed Mother. And they were to follow Jesus' ones because he's divine and human. we were placing a double seal after my own of the acts done in my will upon all the acts of creatures. So there's the second layer. How sweet for me was the company of my inseparable mother, because she never ever left the divine will. Company in operating or working makes happiness, delight, love of tenderness, competition, accord, and heroism arise. So there seems to have been a lot of stuff going on between Jesus and Mary. Isolation produces the opposite. Therefore, as we worked together, myself and my dear mother, seas of happiness and delight on both sides, and seas of love arose, competing with each other, dived into each other, and produced great heroism. These seas arose not for ourselves, but also for those who would keep us company in our will, all the children of the divine will. Even more, I could say that these seas turned into many voices which called man, that is humanity, to live in our will, and to give back to humanity the happiness of his original nature and all the goods that he had lost from withdrawing our will. Okay. So the third seal is now Luisa. Now I come to you, that's Luisa. After my celestial mother, I called you, so that all human acts may have their first seal done by me, the second done by my mother, and the third one by a creature of common stock. Common stock means born with original sin. You couldn't say Blessed Mother was common stock when she was born in the same way as Adam was. My eternal love would not be content. Now, his eternal love is Jeremiah 31:3. I've loved you with an everlasting love, and I'm constant in my affection for you. So, Jeremiah 31:3. My eternal love would not be content if I did not raise one of the common stock, one who must open the doors to those who would dispose themselves to enter these gates and in order to live in the divine will. Now there's Luisa being told straight up, she is the one to open the door to the kingdom of the divine will for the rest of us. This is the reason for my many manifestations, for the many values and effects which I made known to you about my will. These will be the powerful magnets to draw you and then others to live in it. However, in order to enter our will and follow the sublime flight of my acts and those of my inseparable mother, being of common stock, you could not enter our will if you did not have, watch this now, or had at least been transformed into the nature which came out of my hands before man withdrew from our will. So what he's saying there, since you were born with the original sin, you could not have entered into the divine will in the way I'm asking you to do if I had not brought you back to the point of the fall and you pick up from where Adam left off. You've got to go beyond. That's why we're being brought back to the origin. So let me read that again. You could not enter our will if you did not have or had at least been transformed into the nature which came out of my hands before Adam withdrew from our will. That's where the Lord is going with us. Here are then my many graces in order to restore your nature, to restore your soul to that original state. That's the state of original innocence. I mean, no saint before Luisa had been able to conceive that at all. Wasn't possible. As I kept giving you graces, Jesus said, I removed from you, watch this, the seeds, the tendencies, the passions of rebellious nature. Now, how the church would word that is concupiscence was removed. Concupiscence was removed. And if concupiscence is removed, then any tendency towards sin is gone. That's the condition that people have in heaven. So you're actually living the life of the blessed on earth. Isn't it amazing? But always leaving you free. You can always go out if you want. Having to call you into the centre of my will is to live a communal life. You're not on your own. You're entering the very centre of all things. Now, anyone who has had any experience of contemplation and aloneness with God knows that your experience is that you're in the centre of the universe. Not only are you not alone, but you're actually in the very hub of all activity. And yet you are sitting in a chair and your mouth is shut and you are apparently doing nothing or asleep. Because if you enter deeply into it, it looks like sleep on the outside. Okay. And so the communal life of the Blessed Trinity is you're entering into their creative acts, their preserving acts, everything that they're doing in others. It's absolutely incredible. That's what I mean by you're in the very hub of all activity. I always remember a comment of Margaret Thatcher at one stage. As you know, that was yesterday. She was asked why did she persevere in being Prime Minister of England. Might be a good reflection considering the present lady is now in the same position. She said, what is very interesting about it is that you're in the very centre of things that are happening. You are writing history. You're not just living it. And she said, it compensates for everything. It compensates for all the trouble, all the hassle and everything. And I thought, yeah, you've said much more than you know. Because that is exactly the position of the contemplative. You're right in the very heart of things. You're in that place where you are actually at one with God creating, with God preserving, with God redeeming, with God blessing and sanctifying. You're there. You're in the centre of it. Now, when I was growing up, an image of heaven was given which was totally wrong, and that is you're sitting on a cloud playing a harp, as if you were doing nothing. So I tried that out on a group of teenagers once, and they said they'd be so bored they'd go to hell for a change. Now, they actually meant that because they need activity. And what we were not told is that you're in the very centre of everything, where everything's happening. If you told them that's what heaven was, they'd say, oh yeah, I'll go there all right. Because we all like to be in the centre of where everything's happening. You often hear young people say, it's all happening. And they get so excited about being in the centre of very important activity. Well, that's what the divine will is. That's what it is. You live a communal life with the divine will to make you cover all the acts by me, which are not yet known by human beings. It was necessary to restore your nature to this happy state. In other words, the state of the blessed. And I did this for my own propriety and sanctity and dignity. I hate the word decorum, so I keep on trying to change it. Otherwise, you could not have run with me. This is very interesting. In the endless acts of my will, nor could you be with me with that familiarity which is needed in order to operate together. And one of the things that's fascinating about these writings is Luisa's familiarity with him, to the point of complaining about him and telling you need awful patience with him and all the rest of it. That's the familiarity of somebody who's very close to somebody else, okay? So I want to give you Revelation 22, verses 14 and 15. Hebrews 12:14, which I give you quite frequently, and one that I don't give you often, and I should have given it to you very frequently, is Isaiah 35. There are only 10 verses in it. But Isaiah 35 is a compendium of the gospel. You start off in your slavery and you are released, and then you're put on the high road to heaven, and only the saints can walk on this road. It's the road of redemption, and they're already living the life of beatitude. That's Isaiah 35. So, in this situation, the passions, the seeds of tendencies which are not good, would have been like many bars of division between you and me. Do you see it? So they have to be removed. At the most, you would have been at the commands of my will, like many of my faithful ones who can actually do something that God wants to do, but they cannot be in that intimacy and actually imitate his acts and repeat and echo him. They're not in that kind of relationship. But you would have been very far from doing what I did. And neither you nor I would have been happy. While living in my will is precisely this, to live fully happy on earth. That's the beatitude of heaven on earth. And then move on to live more happy in heaven. But you have it on earth. Now, St. Elizabeth of the Trinity wrote beautifully about her relationship with the three divine persons and said, I am living the life of the blessed on earth. It's just that on earth you have to continue to suffer and redeem and gain merits. In heaven, the suffering is over. That's the only difference. Which she was very clear about it. And you can see how clear Jesus is here. So, therefore I tell you, true daughter of my volition, first happy birth from my will. My firstborn, in other words. Okay. Be attentive and faithful to me. Now, that firstborn of my will means that she's the very first after our Blessed Lady. Be attentive and faithful to me. Come into my eternal volition. Watch this. Number one, my acts await you. They're wanting the seal of your acts. Number two, the acts of my mother await you. And number three, the whole of heaven awaits you, wanting to see all of their acts glorified in my will by a creature of their own stock. The present and future generations await you is number four, to be given back their lost happiness. No, the generations will not end until man returns into my womb, beautiful, dominating, just as he came out of my creative hands. And that's the answer to all the people who are saying it's the end of the world tomorrow. Okay? He says that humanity has got to come back to him exactly as it came out of him. Well, that's not today or tomorrow. Okay, I just love that. No, the generations will not end until man, that is the whole of humanity, returns into my womb, beautiful, dominating, just as he came out of my creative hand. Notice the dominating, he was made Lord of the earth. But we have to become lords of ourselves first, don't we? So he says, I'm not content with having redeemed man, even at the cost of waiting. I will still have patience. But he must return to me as I made him, by the power of my will. By doing his own will, he went down into the abyss and transformed himself into a brute. By doing my will, he will rise and acquire new transformations. Can't you hear Luke 15 all over the place there? That the human race is the prodigal son. Okay. You go down into your wasteland and you've got to come back. So by doing my will, he will rise and acquire the new transformations into the nature created by me. Now that is the New Jerusalem, which is in Revelation 20 and 21. That's the New Jerusalem. So he will acquire the new transformation into the nature created by me. Then I will be able to say, I have accomplished everything. That's the consummatum est of history. Now, when you go to Psalm 22, and the whole description of Psalm 22 gives you the internal sufferings of the Lord, insofar as they knew them at that point. At the very end, the last two stanzas, you're given the most wonderful prophecy about the future of humanity coming back to God. It's the one place in the Bible where they actually get this image. Now, they're not talking about divine will, but they are talking about the whole of humanity coming back to God. And you know what it says at the end of it? Consummatum est. That's exactly what Jesus said on the cross. It's finished. Consummatum est. And so he's saying it here. I will have accomplished it is accomplished is consummatum est. And he said, it's when man comes back to me in the same way as he came. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And it's such a positively wonderful thing. Therefore, people in the divine will can see over the present problems into a future full of hope. Can't you? That's Jeremiah 29:11. A future full of hope. And you see, one of the things that's going to be wrong with people as we go on is that they will have no hope. They'll have no vision. And we have to try and give them God's plan. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. Okay. So now we come to November the 16th, 1922. And we're going to be talking about divine works and the God, first of all, creates and then he preserves. They're his two actions. Okay. And he's giving us a historical thing here as well. So, as I was in my usual state, my beloved Jesus on coming drew me all into his most holy will. It was as if I had under my eyes all the work of creation. Now notice, the deeper you go into the divine will, the greater your vision. When Luisa starts, it's her own little bed, her own little struggles, the little town of Corato, and it might get out to Italy. Do you know what I mean? And then by the time she gets into the divine will, you're seeing the whole of creation, the whole of history, because divine will is universal. And the thing that God gives you is a universal vision. Not only a universal vision of history, but a universal vision for prayer as well. You get to the point where it's impossible to pray for yourself. Yeah, you just pray in the divine will as he wants you to pray. Okay. So I saw under my eyes all the work of creation, and I followed all that my sweet Jesus had done for his humanity. And then, for the whole of humanity. Then, after we followed it together, he told me, my daughter, my will acts in different ways. First, it operates, that is, it does the work. And then it preserves what it has done. So the divine will created everything and then stays in everything to preserve it. In creation, I operated and I ordered everything. And after I did everything, my will remained in everything as the preserver of everything. So it's in the tree, it's in the flower, it's in every animal, plant, rock, everything. From that time on, it has done nothing new in the order of creation. So if we claim that something new has turned up, it's wrong. Then, the second thing is that my will entered the field again to operate, and I descended from heaven to the earth. So now we're dealing with redemption. Number 1 is creation. Number 2 is redemption. I came to redeem man. And my work was not for a little in creation. Creation was 6 days. Do you remember we were told that? Mm-hmm. So this time it's 33 years. Then again, I returned to preserve everything I did in redemption. He sent the Holy Spirit to preserve everything in the church. It's very interesting, isn't it? Therefore, just as the Son exists by virtue of my preserving will for the good of all and for each one, so are the goods of redemption in act or in motion for all and for each one. Okay, so the goods of redemption are the Mass and the sacraments and the cross and the Word of God and all prayer and all the rest of it. So now he said, coming to Luisa, my will wants to go back to work. This is to open the kingdom of the divine will. And do you know what it wants to do? It wants to operate in the soul, that which it operated in my humanity, which is absolutely amazing. This will be an extremely long work of mine, more than redemption. Now, redemption was 33 years. But in redemption, he was dealing with a God-man, Okay, with us he's dealing with poor little sinners trying to get on our feet. So it's going to be extremely long. So there is an era of the new and divine holiness. Humanity is not going to get on its feet immediately. Okay. And you probably know from your own experience that you can know a good bit about divine will. It's quite another matter to have put all of that into action and to make it part of yourself. It's one of the reasons why I love going back to the early volumes, is that I realise the bits I missed, and I'm teaching it. Do you know what I mean? And I realise, God, that's completely new. I never noticed that before. Do you know what I mean? And that's the value of going back over it over. And I love these early volumes, absolutely love them. Because the later ones are sort of putting the icing on the cake. But if you forgot the ingredients for the cake, there's nothing really to put icing on. And that's why I've sent a number of people back from higher volumes to the lower volumes to get in on the foundations again. So this will be an extremely long work of mine, more than redemption. And just as I formed a mother for myself in order to operate redemption, in whom I conceived my humanity. Now there's your answer for someone who asks you, how was Jesus conceived? He said, I conceived my humanity. It does not say, she conceived my humanity. Do you see that? So now I have chosen you in order to operate what my will operated in my humanity. See then, my daughter, this is about works, and works of my supreme volition. You're a bit like space, which has offered itself to let me work. Oh dear, now we really could have a long discussion about this. You need to go back to the book of Genesis, and you're told there was nothing there. There was space for him to work. And if he's to work in us, he needs space. And that's why in volumes 1 to 4, he told us to put our own will aside and to put our ego aside and to give him space. And then he moves on and he says, look, will you get into your nothingness? And then I've got the space to work. Is that okay? And so we have to give him that space. That's the gift that we give him. So you will be like a space which offered itself. Now notice it's voluntary. In order to let me create and to place in order the sun, the stars, the moon and the air and so on. If you look at my side garden at the moment, I have given space to my friend Ben to create. I have to give him time as well. But you have to give that person space to create. And I'm looking at it and saying, Lord, you're asking us to do that inside and to give you the time you need as well. We'd like it instantly. We'd like it overnight. It's not going to work that way. But we have to give him the space and the time, and then he'll do it. In order to let me create and to place in order the sun, the stars, the moon, the air, as well as all the beauty that exists in the vault of the heavens, and all the good which descends from heaven. Okay. I read that rather quickly, didn't I? Let's go back and read it slowly. You give me the space, he says, and I will put into that the sun, the stars, the moon, the air, as well as all the beauty that exists in the vault of heavens, and all the good which descends from heaven. That's what I'm going to put into that space. So he's going to create a new heavens and a new earth inside of you. Now, there's loads of texts in the New Testament about the new heavens and the new earth. Now I create new heavens and new earth. That's what he's actually doing in divine will. So I just didn't think of the references there. But if you just simply write down new heavens and new earth. It's all over the New Testament. Okay. You will be like my humanity, which never opposed what my will wanted to do. And I will enclose in you what the supreme volition did in me, so as to have its repetition. So I am a space to let him work. Isn't that fantastic? Afterwards, Luisa said, I was receiving absolution. I wonder what she said to the priest. Could you wonder? And I said to myself, my Jesus, I want to receive this absolution in your will. And immediately, without giving me time, Jesus added, and I do absolve you in my will. And as I absolve you, my will puts the words of absolution on the way to absolve whomever wants to be absolved and to forgive whomever wants forgiveness. This is extremely important, that if you ask the Lord to forgive you in the divine will, that means that forgiveness goes out to all humanity, past, present and future. Isn't that brilliant? Yeah. What do we need more than anything else? Forgiveness. Yeah. We need this more than anything else. It's brilliant stuff. My will takes all and not one only. Because you see, if we understand how God operates, it's universal. But those who are disposed take more than anybody else. So at any particular moment, it's the people who are more disposed to receive that gift who will receive more, but everybody will receive something, which is terribly important. So somebody who is not ready at all to forgive will receive the first graces they need to begin disposing them to forgive. So if we keep asking the Lord to forgive in the divine will, then this person gets more and more and more and more help until they reach the point of being able to forgive. That's terribly important. So we're learning how to help people on the inside. Because we know that by talking to them on the outside, it doesn't do much, does it? Okay. So, November the 20th, 1922, the currents of love between God and man. These are the emails or the telephone exchanges, the currents of love. I was thinking, Luisa said, of how my sweet Jesus suffered many pains when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, but not from creatures, since he was alone, rather abandoned by all, but from the eternal Father. There were currents of love between him and the celestial Father, and in these currents all souls were placed. Now, she tells us in the Hours of the Passion that he had the passion of love, then the passion for sins, and then the passion of the Jews. Do you remember? Yeah. Now, here she's talking about the passion of love. Okay? So in these currents, there was all the love of God. You can't say God in English. That doesn't make sense. There were all the currents of love of God for each one of them, and all the love that each of them owed to God. And since what we owed was missing, he arrived at suffering such pains as to surpass all other pains to the point of sweating living blood. And my Jesus, pressing me to his heart to be relieved, told me, "My daughter, the pains of love are the most excruciating of all. See, in these currents of love between my Father and me, there's all the love that all the creatures owed me, and therefore there is betrayed love, denied love, rejected love, unknown love, trampled love, etc." And that's the most fantastic thing if you begin to really look at it. Oh, how piercingly it reaches my heart to the point that I feel that I am dying. Okay. So you have this eternal love going between the Father and the Son. And then you've got all this betrayed and sinful so-called love on our part. And to connect us into that current of love, Jesus has to pay for it, and he pays for it with his blood. So now we come to the currents between God and us. This is number 2, the second paragraph. You must know that in creating man, I fixed many currents of love between me and him. Having created him was not enough for me. No, I was to place so many currents of love between him and me that there was not to be one part of him in which these currents wouldn't flow. So, in his intelligence ran the current of my wisdom. Look at this. In his eyes ran the current of my light. In his mouth the current of my word. In his hands the current of love, of the sanctity of works. In his will the current of love for God. His own love. And so with all the rest. Man was made to be a continuous communication between himself and his creator. Isn't that absolutely unbelievable? Hence the Jacob's ladder is terribly important. That's Genesis 28. Because Jacob saw that there had to be this communication between heaven and earth. And he saw that it was angels. But when you go to John 1:51, Jesus said that he was the fulfillment of that dream. That it's through him that these currents between God and us go. And the church actually says that all the time. It's through him and with him and in him. Okay. So, with sin, man broke all these currents and remained separated from me. Now, the current really means a connection between us and life, and a connection between us and love. And one of the things that's very noticeable about man in his wickedness is that he's desperately unhappy. And if you look at our nation, just to take one example, how it's more and more and more sick. That sickness is soul sickness expressed in its body. Because it's so unhappy, it has broken away from love and from life. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, if you told them that, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. So he said, do you know how this happened? Look at the sun. All of its light hits the surface of the earth and invests it so much as to make it feel its heat, so alive and real as to bring fertility and life to everything which the earth produces. So, one can say that the sun and the earth are in communication with each other. Oh, how much tighter are the communications between man and myself, the true eternal Son. Now, if a human being could have the power to break between the earth and the sun, the current of life that hits the surface of the earth, what harm would he not do? All life would become extinct. The sun would withdraw all the current of life into itself, the earth would remain in darkness, and the fertility would be without, the whole thing would be without life. What penalty would he not deserve? Man did this in creation, and I descended from heaven to the earth in order to reunite these currents of love. But oh, how much it cost me. And man continues with his ingratitude and returns to break these currents repaired by me. Isn't that a wonderful way of looking at it? I'm going to stop there for a while.